This meeting is being recorded.
What's going on, y'all? This is your girl, Brie Undeniably, checking in for another episode of my speaker series, Deep Conversations with Dope Individuals, where we're discussing development, decision-making, and dedicating yourself to purpose. I am here with a super dope individual who goes by the name of Dr. Michael Alcée. Michael, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so good to be here, Brie. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. Before I give you the introduction that you deserve, I am going to give a couple shout outs. I like to get those out of the way in the beginning of the episode. So, first and foremost, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube or if you're listening to it on wherever you get your podcasts, you will hear that crisp, clean audio and you will see that crisp, clean video. That is all thanks to Gotham Podcast Studio. So if you can see the studio I'm recording in, as well as all the great people behind the scenes help me out with the production of this series, that's all thanks to Gotham Podcast Studio. So shout out to them. The next shout out, as always, I'd like to shout out a sponsor of mine, MC Kicks. They are always hooking it up with all of the dope merch, customizable kicks, denims, whatever you want. So if you want to check out MC Kicks, you can find them at EMCEEKICKS. If you want to go to their website, just add .com to the end of that. And finally, as I always speak about, when you're building something of your own, you also have to pump yourself up. So if you have not checked out my website, you can go to brieundeniably.com. That's where you can get all of your dope individual merch or your I Am Possible merch. You can also check out all the other cool things that I'm doing. So though I love podcasting, it's just one part of the many things that I do. So I also do speaking engagements. I'm doing workshops, all in the personal and professional development space. So go ahead, check that out, brieundeniably.com. And that's where you can see what I'm doing and get all that merch. All right, those are all the shout outs. We are ready to kick into it. So with me today, I have Dr. Michael Alcée, who is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Tarrytown, New York, and mental health educator at the Manhattan School of Music. He specializes in the psychology of artists and everyday creativity and the professional development of therapists. His contributions have appeared in the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, NPR, Salon.com, and on the TEDx stage. His forthcoming book from Norton entitled Therapeutic Improvisation, How to Stop Winging It and Own It as a Therapist will be out in spring 2022. Michael, once again, welcome to the show.
Oh, so great to be here. I'm excited to talk.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you. I already, in our introduction, I'm sure my listeners can tell that there's a lot of crossover here in the therapeutic space, in the counseling community. So you will actually be no stranger to the way that I like to start our conversation. I always like to really mirror what we do in the counseling community by meeting our clients where they're at. I like to do the same thing with my guests so my listeners can understand a little bit more about you. So help us meet you where you're at and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so it turns out that I tried to get away from psychology and counseling as much as I possibly could, but it came to find me again. So I grew up with a mother who was a social worker, and from a very, very young age, I was always curious about how people worked and their stories. And not only was my mom a social worker, but she was really a lover of literature. And so when we would talk about whatever I was reading, To Kill a Mockingbird or an Arthur Miller or Tennessee Williams play or something fantastic like that, or even a good movie, we talk about the characters in those works as if they were our friends or even a side of us. And when I would talk about my, woes as a child or as a teenager, my mom would treat it with the same kind of curiosity and wonder as if we were talking about a piece of art. And I can distinctly remember, Brie, when I was a kid, one of my earlier memories is walking in my pajamas into the living room and stumbling on my mom talking to a stranger. They looked very comfortable and they looked very cozy. And it turns out my mom was starting her private practice. And I didn't know what that was. But all growing up, she eventually moved to the garage. And I would say hello to clients and patients, as we would call them, as if they were friends too. So to me, talking about what's deep most important to you, what is the most profound and moving, difficult, exciting things going on in your life is being home. So to me, therapy is always about finding your way back home.
Wow. I love this introduction into your life and into psychology. And even though said you were trying to get away from it, I think that's so unique and such a special way to put that, it's finding your way home. I kind of want to just keep going, push right into this place that you sort of left us at. So, you understood sort of the realm of psychology from a very young age. I mean, just the conversations about book characters, really, really unique and interesting way that your mom really implemented that into your life. Really, my question is, tell me more.
Yeah, it's the other thing too, is that I think for those of us who are psychologists or counselors or any amateur students of human behavior, right? We're curious.
Yes.
And the thing about my mom too that was wonderful is that she was always curious about not only people, like just what was happening around, So we could be at a diner, which were very common in Long Island where I grew up. That's what we did. We went to the movies in the diner, and she would kind of notice, could notice the shift of tone or nonverbal that would signal that something was happening at a table beside us, and have me notice as if, like, look at how intricate we work. My mother also, believe it or not, was an immigrant. Both my parents are sort of immigrants, and my mom her family came from the Middle East through Panama and Colombia to Brooklyn. But my mom looked Irish. She had red hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. And so people were very stunned when they were talking in Spanish, and all of a sudden she would respond back fluently. But usually what she did is that she didn't just respond back. She'd ask them questions about what country they're from, where their family, all the questions, because she was curious. And, coming back to literature, I was thinking about this morning when I was thinking about our talk. And one of her favorite plays, or our favorite plays together, was a wonderful one by Thornton Wilder called Our Town. And the story is this lovely New England town, piece of America, from the early 1900s. And there's a character named Emily, and she dies. And at the end, she comes back and she's watching everybody, and she's watching a birthday party, and she's feeling, why aren't people enjoying this beautiful, precious thing we have that's life? And the stage manager says something to her, not many do while they're living. Only the saints and the poets really notice. And my mother was one of those poets who noticed. And she taught me that the beauty of really connecting in psychology and literature and art is to connect to what is so precious and beautiful and fragile about this existence. And to me, so she gave me both wonder, like of awe, and wonder of, I wonder.
You really just gave me a chill, just kind of hearing that quote, one, that not many of us do while we're living, experience life or love life or enjoy it. But also I just think, sort of your cornerstone in the field of psychology is so, it's so unique, and it's so beautiful, and it's such I guess a different way to enter the field of psychology, because I feel like you said that place of wonder. That's not always a place that people will enter the field of psychology from.
Yeah.
And I just think, like I said, unique is really the word that comes to my mind. But it seems like your mom helped frame the world for you in a way that kind of pushing into psychology and into that field made sense, because you had that element of wonder, that, wanting to know more about humanity and the way that, the intricacies of the way that the world is working within human being existence.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, because I think a lot of the people who think, those of us who are counselors or psychologists, are enamored of problems, or we're, really interested in just the technical parts of it. And I think that's true. I mean, one of the great things about learning any craft is learning how to use words or use your different interventions to get at something deeper. But I think one of the reasons that I've written a lot about this recently, especially in the new book, is I think we're more artists than we realize, as therapists, but also as people. I think sometimes we shortchange ourselves in how much magic is available to us in everyday life and also in our relationships. And I think it was really refreshing for me to have that entrance into this wonderful field, because then you sort of feel like every day is a new possibility of being re-enchanted. Even if you're disillusioned. By the way, one of the wonderful things about talking about great literature is you talk about all the struggles, and you talk about, the ambivalences and the deep challenges and struggles that we all face. But what the wonderful thing about going, whether it's from Greek mythology to Shakespeare to John Steinbeck or, F. Scott Fitzgerald or Virginia Woolf, it doesn't matter who you're talking about, but you also feel like we're all in this together.
Isn't that such a great way to put it? And I think that, it's almost like the power of characters that can really shape our world, especially as young people. We can see a character story and feel like we can really relate, but then kind of be curious about how can I relate to this character if their life is nothing like me, but I'm feeling like these same, understanding these same life problems. And I know that I personally felt that when I was younger, just reading characters in books. And I think it's awesome how your mom took it a step further and sort of pulled those characters out as if they were friends and spoke about them as if they were people that you knew. But that relation to characters, it is a unique experience that we go through as human beings, whether we're children or adults, in that connection to humanness in books.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll sort of riff on another angle of this too. It's like I didn't realize it. I just stumbled upon this wonderful gig at Manhattan School of Music. And it was really a happy accident, because I decided I wanted to do private practice because my wife and I were having a son, and I wanted to be able to really be more here. And I wanted to be like what I call a full contact father. I really wanted to be around and to really be enjoying and savoring this creative time, because I think children really show us how to be creative again. And to me, that if you want wonder and delight, hang around children. They'll remind you, and if you've forgotten, they'll teach you again. And so I did that, and by just diving into this private practice, this job at Manhattan School of Music opened up. And it turns out, as a kid, I trained as a classical pianist, and in college I did jazz piano. And one of the things that I also bring from both of those backgrounds is appreciating the sort of richness of the different harmonies that change in our lives, even throughout the day. If you think about it, we don't think of ourselves as basically we're sophisticated emotion regulation machines. But at the same time, if you want to think of it more artistically, we're all jazz improvisers trying to figure out how to read the changes of our lives. And sometimes we don't know which tune we're playing. And sometimes with a global pandemic, the changes kind of get thrown at us really, really quickly. And then sometimes we're not only playing on our own, we're playing with somebody else. And how do we figure out their changes while we're figuring out ours? And how do we share the stage and make an interesting mashup together? So I really was intrigued by how much my piano training and my music training helped me understand how fluid we are, how much we shift. And it makes it a lot easier for us to be compassionate with ourselves. Could you ever have that experience, Bree, or any of our listeners, when you feel like, where did I go? I thought I was this. I thought I was feeling angry. Now I'm feeling sad. Now I'm feeling very little. Right? I thought I loved this person. I hate them. And it goes all over the place. And I thought I wanted to be this, or I felt like I should feel that, but I'm feeling this. We tend to see our multiplicity as a problem. And yet, Walt Whitman, the great poet, said, do I contradict myself? Very well, then, I'm large. I contain multitudes. So one of the things that I love about music is that it reminds us that we start from a place of polyphony. In other words, we have multiple melodic lines operating at the same time, and we can all feel like we're in a fugue state, right? Because it's like, which one are we trying to catch up with? But I think what good therapy does, and also what great friends and family conversations help us connect, which is that line, right?
Wow. I'm just like, I'm feeling lost and found in your words right now.
That's great.
I am just, the way that you just used music and psychology as sort of this fusion to depict who we are as people was profound and beautiful. But also, I'm feeling so connected to your words and, just the understanding of humanness, I guess.
Yeah.
It feels, it's so interesting because I feel like so often with all humans, that includes counselors and psychologists alike, as well as our clients and patients, we all go through this, I guess, self-discovery piece.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting to hear it sort of spun in the way that you spun it, because there's not necessarily one path that we're supposed to be following, but for some reason there's something deep inside of us that feels like we have to have it all together and just be going down this one path. But in reality, we are a multiplicity of many different things and many different emotions and many different experiences that create and develop who we are, on top of the fact that, like you said, we could be harmonizing with another person as well. So trying to figure that out. And the experience of figuring it out is really what I'm gathering from this. And it's so human, but the way that you're putting it just makes so much sense.
We are walking contradictions, but we complement ourselves in such fascinating ways, right? Like we're so, I think, there was a wonderful jazz song called You Are Too Beautiful. And there's a poet by the name of Billy Collins who riffs on it. And he says, like, the line is like, you are too beautiful and I'm a fool. And, Billy Collins says, but nobody ever says, you are a fool and I am too beautiful. But it turns out we are all foolishly beautiful in trying to figure out how to work with these different sides. And the funny thing that you mentioned too, Bree, that I think is a real revelation to most of us is this is how we're built. Yeah. We are all built this way. We are all built to be both divided and connected. And this fiction of having a single self at all times that we must rely on and be perfect is so counter to what we actually are. And it does us an injustice. It does us a disservice. Mm-hmm. And actually, here's another point that I thought is really, really cool, because we talk so much about the wonderful importance of inclusivity and diversity in our culture. And it's a great that we are waking up to the essential aspect of really honoring the wonderful mosaic that, this world is. And yet, when we look at ourselves, we can so easily marginalize sides of ourselves. We can easily cut them off and treat them as second-class citizens, and they're inside us. So I believe that if we can learn how to really embrace and own our diversity within, we can help really, honor the diversity outside of us. And I think it's something that we all can do, no matter what political affiliation, ethnicity, religion, doesn't matter. This is an ongoing game. This is an inside job.
It's really like this ownership of self in our multiple selves, if that's how we want to phrase it, but ownership of who we are in all that we are, in the many phases and spaces and relational situations as we are, owning all of those pieces. I think it's so interesting that you said, how we are kind of becoming a more inclusive society, or as you said, that diversity that we're trying to make sure is infused in society, and sort of making sure that we are always inclusive in everything that we do. But we have such a difficult time seeing that in ourselves, seeing the diversity of who we are, or seeing the unique characteristics of who we are, and really embracing those and embodying those. And something that I think is interesting to add on to this is we are also different individuals moment to moment. I am learning from this conversation alone and taking in information and growing just from having the conversation with you. And I think that's another piece that we, if we are sort of doing the same thing for a long period of time, we feel like we're still the same person, but we don't really include those growth factors in who we are and what we do and what we're working towards.
I love that. And I love what you said about being in the moment, because I think the creative act happens in a spontaneous gesture, as psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott used to say. This is the guy who came up with the idea of the transitional object, of the teddy bear and transitional space. And I think you're right, you know, and it also happens in the present. It happens right here now. And that was the reason why when I was trying to think of a good title for the book, I thought improvisation. Because the paradox of improvisation, whether you're a therapist or whether it's just us conversing, right, is this notion of sort of going with where we are in the moment, but it's not like we haven't prepared at all, right? We've prepared. So jazz player isn't totally doing everything spontaneously, but they've prepared to see what the moment brings out.
I love it.
And then what happens is together we create something new. So Bree, as we're talking, we create something new as I resonate with something that you say and you resonate with something that I say, and then something magical happens, and that's the alchemy. And I think that it's something different. If we looked at mental health as how do we expand the range of our possibility for that kind of creativity? How much happier, healthier, more productive could we be? And how much more like kind to ourselves and each other? Right.
Absolutely. You know, I really, I want to stay right here where we're at, because you mentioned the book. I'm already intrigued by what you're saying. And I just think it's so interesting. Something that I've come across before, and I know I've spoke about in my podcasts, is sort of the fusion of practice or training or, you know, working towards a goal, and then the add-on of circumstance. And I think a lot of people see those two things as like, you know, for someone in a performance art industry, that could be their big break. Once that they've been practicing and going, and then that circumstance happens upon them. But for us, it can happen in a therapeutic setting, or for someone else, it can happen wherever that chance and circumstance presents itself. It's like we can only do so much practicing and training, but then the improvisation is going to happen once that circumstantial thing that we have really no idea what it might be happens upon us.
I mean, that is the excitement of it too. See, as human beings, we love anticipation and we love mystery, as Jonah Lehrer kind of writes so beautifully about in a new book. And the other thing is that there's something about like being right on the edge of what's familiar and what's new. And I think that's where life really feels like joyful. And that's where wonder, I think, happens. Because wonder is both, oh my gosh, so fascinating, and oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. Right?
You know, is wonder something that has stuck with you, like from day one or from the early days back with your mom, sort of learning about this field and this space? Is that something that's really carried you through your journey?
Yeah, I think wonder, and I think the other thing that you alluded to before, which I forgot, is I think we're so, I jokingly referenced it, which is I think we try and run away from ourselves too, all of us.
Yes.
I think we try and run away from where we either come from or who we think we are or we should be. And I think what happens as we develop, I think we recollect it and we reclaim it, and something that we thought was just a deficit or a problem or some kind of maybe something that we thought that's not helpful in my life becomes something interesting. Like I'll give you an example, just to give you, my mind thinks in songs. And so every once in a while, as I've done my own psychological work, Tom Petty's old song Refugee starts playing in my head, and the chorus is like, you don't have to live like a refugee. And it's like, well, why is this song playing in my head? It came out like when I was really, really young. I have no reason to really recall it. But it turns out my father was a literal refugee from Egypt who came from Egypt to Paris to America. And as much as I don't know it, it's in my bones.
Wow.
And the story of and the sensitivity of feeling like what it must be like for people who do feel exiled from themselves or their country or what's rightfully theirs speaks to me. And not saying, oh, that's so terrible that I have that in my backstory, or my dad had that in my backstory. Rather like, wow, that gives me a different kind of sensibility and sensitivity to appreciating it. And we all don't have to live like a refugee. We all really want to have our own kind of sense of kind of groundedness in our own country, metaphorically.
Yeah. Wow. That, I just think that the fact that that would play in your head and you sort of realize that it was in your bones. I think that just the power right there of that statement spoke volumes to me. Sort of this, I guess, being, not just who you are, but a combination of the individuals who are in your life or were in your life, as well as the experiences that they have gone through. Just really, really unique way for that to happen. And I also think it's so interesting that you said you think in song. I love
I think in song all
you
the time.
think in song. And I had a conversation with someone the other day specifically about how, we were talking about happiness, but this person was saying that they realized that they had sort of come out of, or were starting to come out of, this deep depression that they were in when they started to sing again. And I just think that it's the infusion of music in everyone's lives, whether they work in music industry or have any formal training in the music industry or none at all. It
Doesn't
really
matter.
doesn't matter. It
Doesn't
plays
matter.
such an important role in our lives.
You know what's interesting too about that, Brie, and I really love this point that you bring up too, is that we so often relegate feeling to logic, and I should feel this or I should do that. But it turns out, the funny thing, the reason I wrote this book, it's in the interpersonal neurobiology series of Norton, and the reason is because we are built to feel first. We are imaginative, empathic creatures first. That is our first education. And those are the places where we are much more well developed early, and we lose touch with it. And we start to lose that connection to our intuition, to our imagery, to metaphor, to humor, to this artful way in which we kind of are curious about the world. And so I think it's really important and that's child's mind, by the way. The child's mind is connected to that,
Yes.
and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful gift. And so I think it's really interesting that it's so easy that we push that aside. So we also have to be careful about pushing that aside. And then I think when we have feeling kind of conversing with logic, it's like that old Da Vinci has this wonderful picture of the ideal man or ideal human being is like a man like in a square in a circle. The square is logic and the circle is emotion. And when we can bring those together, God, like that's when we become divine.
Yes.
And I think it's really important, but I think we sometimes really we don't give feeling enough credit.
I'm making some connections right now with everything that you're saying, and I want to see if I can piece them together and we can work on this together. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking back of, what you just said about that, the child's mind, the creativity that we have and we sort of lose along the way. When I think of creativity, at least for me personally, I definitely pair it with that emotional piece, that sense of feeling that, that's where I feel like a lot of my creativity comes from, is what I'm feeling. That's where that driver is. Or, they might drive each other. But then, in that sense of sort of losing that child's mind, it seems like we sort of lose the creativity or, the doing of creativity to sort of find our way in the logical world around us. And then this really brings me to sort of tying in that sort of several selves pieces where we're now in the world of logic trying to figure out which path to take, which is the one that makes the most sense, when we've almost pushed aside the emotional, creative piece that we're forgetting to infuse in there to begin with.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
My gosh, it just, putting all those pieces together, it really is. And then back to what you said, we kind of come back and recollect ourselves. And I think that's really true. I think that we actually do sort of recollect those creative pieces and those things that bring us back to that emotional center, and those things that actually bring us the more pure happiness or whatever that might be, those more pure felt emotions that we almost yearn for and don't realize that we are even yearning for them.
It's weird because when we're expected to kind of grow this expertise, right, or know what we're doing, at the same time, the thing that's going to help us guide us there is that childlike side that doesn't need to know what we're doing. And, people think that, like, I do a lot of college counseling, and people think the 20s are the most wonderful years of your life. But I think it's most challenging and difficult because there's such an expectation for us to be an expert, and yet we have to sort of let go of some of that while we're doing it at the same time. It's really weird. We're almost like building a house, but we're also taking it down to the studs at the same time. And it's a very strange thing. And I think lots of us think that there's something wrong with us because we go through that thing. And I think, really what it is that's what the creative process is like. The creative process is both a sort of, actually interesting. Michelangelo felt like that, with the creative process, it was sort of liberating the sculpture from the block of marble, and it was a subtractive process, and it was kind of taking away stuff. But there's also a sense of also coming down to what's the foundation, and also what is it that you really love and want to bring back with you.
So well said. I really love the Michelangelo insert there too, because I don't know that many people think of any of their processes like that. Many people think of a process as something that starts at step 1 and then goes to step 10, and that's something that is built upon, not taken from. But the chipping away of a block of marble to create a masterpiece is actually, the same steps, but we just don't think about a breaking down as part of a process that, feels right or comfortable to do.
And the old psychiatrist joke is when a patient has a breakdown, the psychiatrist says, I don't know whether they're saying I'm sorry or congratulations. Because there's actually some healthy creative destruction that can help us through. And the other thing I think that we don't realize is that sometimes we think the only way to tell the story is forward, but a lot of the story is looking at backwards and understanding the beauty and the inevitability of the story. When you look at a good character in a novel, you don't say, nah, it shouldn't be like this. You're like, wait, how did this make sense? And isn't this interesting, the paths that they took to get from there to there, right? We're so much kinder.
It's so true. And, I actually think that you might have segued this segment better than I could have, because that is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing with this podcast. I think that people's stories are beautiful and seldom told from the place that they think is their natural beginning. And we can always, congratulate someone on the place that they're at now, but if you don't know the story of what brought them to that place, then we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, really. We're only seeing a finished product, but we don't know all of the power behind that finished product. And I guess, with that, you have really brought us into your journey and everything that you have sort of, or some pieces of your journey as you've become who you are now. And I know we talked a little bit about the book and a little bit about Manhattan School of Music. Let's talk about everything that you're doing now, sort of how this has all come together for you, and, how that is building upon everything that you have done throughout your years.
Yeah, it's just really interesting to see. I see a lot of the interplay between all the different fields now.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see the connection between even like something that's going on politically and something that's going on, in literature and psychology. And, one of the things that I was really intrigued about writing this book is that I thought it was really cool to try and have this challenge of how do I bring neuroscience together with psychology and music and literature. And my ultimate hope is that maybe it's be fun to write like a general audience book, because this book is really geared towards therapists, but I would love for people to have a fuller sense of, wait, this is how we work. And
Yes.
and this is beautiful. And it's almost like life hacks my therapist never taught me. Wouldn't that be nice to know? I mean, I feel like one of the things, and I tell this to my patients and clients all the time, is like, I feel like our job is to discover our own instruction manual and really get to know not only how it's made, but also really get a really good troubleshooting section at the end of it.
I think that is so important for everyone to do and, figure out. But I would say people seldom do that, huh?
But I mean, I think you said something too that's really important too. The more that we do that, the more it becomes actually fun. We don't see problems as something bad. We see it as an opportunity to deepen.
Yes.
And that's what I meant about wonder. Wonder always comes back to saying, what more can I be enchanted by? What more can I learn about myself and this world and my relationships? And to me, that's where I get excited. And, whether it's doing a TED talk or writing a book or something like that, or doing this kind of lovely show, it's about exciting, getting involved with us sharing this stuff. Because I think more people actually feel this in their bones and their heart too. And I noticed that, and you probably noticed too with your clients as well, that people really resonate with this stuff. And it's this funny kind of somewhat of a secret.
It's so interesting because people 100% resonate with everything that you're saying, that we're conversating about. And I just think that it's interesting that sometimes we just don't all have the language to sort of have the conversation around it, or even, I would say, one of the most difficult things for people to do is to explain what's going on with them, to really explain how they're feeling, or to really sort of name the thing that is happening inside. And I think that's one of the unique things that we in the helping profession sort of work on, is offering those names and those titles and that verbiage and those helpful ways to sort of describe what someone might be feeling or experiencing or going through. And I think that, you said sort of putting out a book for an everyone audience, not just therapeutic audience, would be magnificent for that specifically, because you're right. It's like the things my therapist never told me. It's like, okay, the therapist is telling me these certain things, but where the heck how did you see that? And I couldn't see it when I'm living it,
And isn't it funny that we don't think of creativity when we think of our personal lives? We think of it, oh, you got to be a sculptor or a painter or a dancer. And if not, you're not creative. And it turns out, by the way, even the artists that I work with, the musicians, don't think they're creative in their personal lives. And the funny thing is that when you tap into this fullness, that's what I think my mom really taught me, is that when you tap into this fullness, that this enhances your artistic creativity. And your artistic creativity. And that's like actually one of the wonderful things I think about this up and coming millennial and Gen Z generation, is that they're really honoring how there can be more kind of permeability between the personal and the professional, in a way that says, wait, why do we section these things off when they really enhance each other? And I think that's really beautiful, that why can't we all celebrate this richness of that creativity?
Right. And really tap into not only the thing that can fuel us as individuals, but that we can really infuse the world with as our expertise, so to speak. It's something that using, sort of leveraging your creativity, especially like you said, with the new generation, especially I know Gen Z is very on TikTok. And if you think about TikTok, and that it's a creative forum, but it's a creative forum that people have found that they get to be exactly who they are. And if they continue to be exactly who they are with the right consistency and, leveraging a few different things, they can make a living out of that. And it's so unique.
Yeah. And it's beautiful what you said too. The more we help find our own voice, artistically, personally, the more we can inspire others to find their true voice. And that's when we're really truly like sharing, and that's when we're truly kind of loving each other as we are and we're meant to be.
Absolutely. I think, again, I think I'm going to make you my co-host, because we we are, as we're sort of approaching the last 15 or so minutes of the show, I like to speak on purpose. And here we are talking about, how we can bring our creativity to the world, I think it has a huge piece of purpose in there. So I like to really dedicate a few minutes in the later half of the podcast to talk about purpose. And I'd love to know sort of what your idea of purpose is, or what it means to you, sort of how it's infused in your life.
It's so interesting. It's something, it's one of those things that I don't think about as intentionally anymore, because I think when you find your purpose, you swim in it,
Mm.
And I can remember when I was in college, I did a field placement for a community psychology class, and I was talking to juvenile delinquent boys who were the furthest away from my experience whatsoever. But what I found was my purpose was that somehow, without really trying, they felt comfortable to really open up with me and share so many different sides of themselves that I imagine others in their lives never would have entertained or even summoned or conjured. And to me, that was a purpose. That was a purpose of saying, how do we help each other to find those voices that are not recognized?
Wow.
And the other thing, that when you find your purpose, and those are your listeners out there who are trying to figure out what their purpose is, when you find your purpose, you'll know, because you will forget time.
Beautiful.
You will forget time, you will forget who you're with, and you will be in such a kind of flow state that you will feel like you have been hovering in some place that you didn't know existed. And that is the place when you know that you've found a big piece of your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I think purpose is a state of being as well.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that I love that you brought up the flow state, because I think that the flow state is something that we as children really feel in that creative space. So we understand what that flow state is, because it is blissful, but also engaging. There's that level of challenge, but not too challenging that we can't do it, but just challenging enough that we are just sort of in this, even if it was coloring back in the, it really is.
Yeah, it can be in something like that. And you watch kids and how engrossed they are,
Yes.
because they're immersed, and they're totally connecting to what they're with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, talk about real presence.
Yes, absolutely. I just, that connection there, it's like we experience it then, and then we come back to really look for it now. And I think the way that you described purpose and how that flow state is a part of it is 100% spot on. And it just makes so much sense with everything that we've spoke about. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left. So in the last 10 minutes, I like to do a couple things. First, I like to do a quick this or that rapid fire question round. Nothing to be concerned about. Okay, great. You're ready. Some people give me the nervous eyes. I'm like, don't worry. It's not.
Dogs.
I promise. Yeah. It's really
dogs.
Like, do you like dogs or cats? That's essentially
dogs.
Like dogs, 100%. After we do the rapid fire, I'm gonna just offer you the floor one more time to leave listeners with whatever you feel be best to leave them with, and then also let us know all of your information, where we can find you, however listeners can get in touch.
Sure.
All right. So rapid fire. At the beginning of the podcast, we talked about sort of 3 pillars. That's development, decision-making, and dedication to purpose. I think we spoke on all of them. So we're going to ask 3 questions. Well, I'm going to ask 3 questions on those things.
The royal way.
Yeah. The first one, development. Are you in this moment currently working more on personal development or professional development?
Both. But
the
actually,
psychologist in you.
It's really true. Yeah, it's both. It's both. But I think it's funny, because right now there's such a synergy between them,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think it really gets cooking. It's
Absolutely.
really fun.
Absolutely. I sometimes, not that I'm trying to trick anyone here, but I very much believe.
That's your right answer.
Yeah,
but yeah.
That is the right answer. I very much believe that they're super intertwined. It's the basis of all of my work is how personal development is what you need for professional development. So you nailed it. I couldn't get you on that one.
Cool.
All right. Decision making. There is no right answer for this one, though. This one is totally on you.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation. So decision making, do you make your decisions based more on choice, meaning you're a numbers person or an analytics guy, or guiding voice, meaning you follow your gut, intuition, spirituality, or something else of the sort? Choice
So
or
what was the
guiding
first?
choice or guiding voice?
Oh.
Sort of. So do you choose the
No,
decision, or does
I'm
the
an
decision come
intuitive.
to you?
I'm an intuitive, really. I mean,
Intuition,
so
yeah.
the only reason I hedged and hesitated was because meaning is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
But usually my intuition is connected to the meaning more.
That makes
So
sense.
I use my intuition and my feel a lot more, and I trust that spidey sense a lot more than when I was younger. I used to try and go the opposite route, and it would often backfire.
You know, I've heard a lot of people sort of teeter back and forth with this, similar to what you said, that, you know, they've done one and now they lean into the other, or vice versa, depending on where they're at in their lives. So I appreciate that answer. Guiding voice. Okay, the last one is dedication to purpose. Is this sort of finding a purpose? Is this a singular moment in time, or is this a daily practice or occurrence?
It's a daily practice. I mean, you know, like that's the fun thing about creativity. They once asked a very famous composer, like, how he felt about the symphony he was working on. He was almost finished, and he said, "No, I'm thinking about the next one now." So I think really it's about, you know, getting energized about. I think we love as human beings finding forms and making new forms. And I think the more that we get excited and into that process, and I think the more that we see life as dynamic, like that, and don't get scared that it has to be so linear, I think then it really becomes enchanting all the time. So I'm like, you know, constant, and I'm always like, my father used to joke with me because my father's a very left-brained logical guy, business guy, and so he used to be like, why are you so always restless? And I realized that it's restless is a good thing. There's a creative restlessness that I think is really healthy.
It's almost like that itch to keep moving. That restlessness
Yeah.
is just that want for, or continuation for more.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That was a beautifully put answer. All right, we are winding down. So, Michael, I want to leave you the floor one last time, whatever you'd like to let listeners know as your final words, and then please let everyone know where they can find you.
Oh, sure. I mean, this has been so much fun, Bria. I was so excited to do this because I had a feeling that we'd be simpatico, and it's just fun. I think the other thing too that I just want to say is it's all about connection.
Oh,
It's it's
absolutely.
it's all about trying to figure out how you can bring out another person's music and bring out yours together, and
Hmm.
that's when it just becomes so much fun, right? Like that's what becomes so invigorating. So thank you for this. You know, if people want to find me, of course you can find me on my website. It's just easy, michaelalcee.com. I have a podcast on there that I did a while back. I have a TEDx talk on those of you who
Awesome.
are introverts. I write on a Psychology Today blog where I write about the connection between creativity and, you know, anxiety and depression and high
Mhm.
sensitivity and political stuff, pop culture references, all sorts of good stuff. And then, of course, for therapists and counselors out there, you know, if you're interested in checking out my book, it's coming out in May,
Awesome.
and it's out for pre-order. So it's on Amazon, and you know, if you check it out, I'd love for you to check it out and put on a review. And then, you know, I hope to hear more. I hope to hear more from others about how this inspires you too. So I am one of those people who loves getting emails. So email me. I'd love to hear, you know, what you're working on, what you're excited by.
Awesome. And then I can add all of this into the show notes as well. So, as well as your email, if you would like me to, or however you want me to offer that for people to get in touch. And I just want to make sure that we give the name of the book. It is Therapeutic Improvisation.
Yeah, I sometimes make a mistake because I forget, but it's therapeutic improvisation, how to stop winging it and own it as a therapist.
Awesome. Wonderful. Uh, Dr. Dr. Michael Alcée, everyone. Here we go at the very last moment, and I trip up on my words, but isn't that the way it is?
That's because we've been flowing the whole time. You know, you had to catch your breath somewhere.
That's it. And, you know, I don't edit anything out, so everyone will hear it, and we're humans, so we make mistakes, and we continue to be
Perfect.
humans. Michael, it has been such a pleasure. Sincerely, thank you so much. We definitely harmonized this whole time.
Yeah, this has been fun. Thank you. This has been a breath of fresh air.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, as I end all my podcasts, until next time, let this be the moment.